I had something going down.
I know you were the busy man. You were just an obedient soldier following the orders of the general, aka your now wife. I'll let you dive into that. But
Got some
I've
hardware.
been I've been good, man. I've been good. Just enjoying summertime, the summertime shy, or what they call it. When I first moved here, all people could talk about when I'd meet them, they'd be like, "Did you just move here?" I said, "Yes." They said, "Just wait till the summer." And you would think that Lake Michigan would turn to gold or something as soon as Memorial Day weekend hit. And that was not the case, did not turn to gold. But I will say this, it's been a fun summer here in Chicago. Great city. It's kind of like the Atlanta of the North, right? People, even though it's a big sports town for professional teams, come fall, everybody's got their sweatshirt on for their college. Just the colleges are all Big Ten, not SEC. So
Yeah.
it's not, it's JV football. Don't get me wrong, but it's still kind of cool to see that atmosphere every fall. So it's been fun here in Chicago. How are
I
you?
love it. Good, man. Adjusting to life as a married man. It's still weird to say. Got some hardware here. So that's a big reason why we haven't been connecting as much. But now we're back, dude. We're here. Very, very pumped for this season, man, and the first live show. We're going to be going live a lot like this. We got Twitter on. We've got our Facebook, UGA Football Live. We'll be going live there. And, of course, YouTube at the Pulse Sports Network. So thanks for everybody jumping in. We're going to talk some Georgia preseason news here in a moment. But, yeah, man, so adjusting to life, we now have adjusted to where all our wedding stuff we've got for people, thankfully to our family and friends for that, but also just additional wedding stuff. We've picked my office to be the designated place for those things. So anything outside of camera you see right now is just boxes and random crap thrown around, dude. It's a mess. And our little place here, oh my gosh, dude. And we're not gonna be able to move till after the season because I'm so busy in the season. So it's just you can't walk. Like I had to basically jump in this chair. So yeah, it's been an adjustment. But we're enjoying it, man. We went to Key West for 6 days and I still look like a ghost. So that's impressive in its own right. I swear I got sun.
Nah, what that tells me is you got some Irish or Scottish in your blood, which is okay. So do I. A nice red base layer is our tan.
Yes.
So don't worry about it.
Absolutely.
Well, I know we have talked offline, but congratulations. Congratulations to your wife. You've outkicked your coverage, as we like to say in the dating marital world. Yeah, could not be more happy for you too. So congratulations.
Thank you, brother. Thank you, man, and congrats for your move to a businessman, a business college, dude.
That's right.
Yes, sir. Moving your way up.
Moving my way up, I guess is I will say this: the process in which you apply to school for graduate school, at least in my perspective, was much harder this time. In high school, a little bit easier. I always tell people my SAT scores in high school I was 6'5", 235, and I ran a 4.7. There was, that kind of just took care of everything else. But when you're applying to grad school and there's no football to be played, it's a little bit different. But as much as I love Chicago, as you and I discussed, I'm moving to Ithaca, New York to go to the S.C. Johnson School of Management at Cornell University, moving on Saturday. So not as big as getting married, but still a step in the right direction in life. So I'm excited.
Dude, many blessings to you for that, man. And dude, I was thinking about this earlier because I was watching the Trump interview, laughing. I was like, dude, as far as the podcast goes, people we've had on us, who's the most likely to become president? And you already look like one, dude. It's the hair, it's the swoop. It's you put a suit on and a blue or red tie. I mean, that's you, brother.
I can assure you that's not happening. But I will say this: the good thing about Cornell is same colors, Georgia red. I actually think they're called like the Big Red, the Bears or something of that nature, but it's a C instead of a G. The football is different, that's for sure. It'll be good either way, but it's definitely a different style of football. I had a lot of friends that played in the Ivy League from back home, and the first thing I noticed when I would get together with all of them, right? Like we'd go out to the bars or whatever, or like go to have a beach weekend. I'd look around and I'd be like, "What position you play?" Like, "Oh, I was offensive center." I was like, "You're the size of our like linebacker. How did you play offensive center?" I was like, but anyway, I really football, good football, but just a different style of football. We'll say that.
Yeah, exactly. And hey, that's a good segue. I'm JC Shelton. He's former Georgia tight end Arthur Lynch. We're going to talk some football now for you guys joining in. Artie, before we move on to some really kind of troubling preseason news for Georgia fans and nationally as well, take us through the mind of a guy. Let's go freshman, and you've done it before, but we'll do it again because it makes sense. We'll do freshman and then moving on to when you got into your sophomore, junior, and ultimately senior year at Georgia and coming into fall camp. The adjustments you have to make, school's about to start, you're dealing with that as well, but also, you grind it all summer and workouts, hopefully, and then eating a lot of pizza, what have you, to get your weight up or down. What is that like for a player going into it and your experience there as a freshman and as you got older?
Yeah, totally. It's a great question, and it's kind of hard to put into words because it's such a transition, right? I think the thing that was the most difficult for me was you step on campus, and we would come in June. There's 2 summer sessions. First summer session, which was like June to basically July, and then through July. So you basically take like 2 summer sessions. And now so many guys graduate early, it's probably different. It's like probably more of a factory, if that makes sense. And guys probably can have a quicker turnaround in terms of that, in terms of acclimation period. But at least for me, man, I got on campus, and the one thing that I wanted to do was like me and Orson Charles were paired up on the bench, paired up on the squat, paired up in the running thing. And, they were kind of pitting us together, but he and I also were competitive guys, big weight room guys. So like we kind of got this little niche amongst our freshman class because they kept our freshman class all together for that first summer from a weight room perspective. I think we had 2 upperclassmen, Marcus Washington and Fred Muntzemeyer. Everyone else was freshmen. And then you kind of like become like, if you're a good weight room guy, you kind of, that's how you differentiate yourself, right? In those first 2 months. And like me and Orson felt like pretty confident in ourselves by the end of the summer. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh shit, dude, there's like 80 other guys in this team and all of them are upperclassmen. These are grown ass men. And so I think that those nerves start to compound each 7-on-7 session because you never really saw the upperclassmen. Different classes, different schedule, different weightlifting schedule. So you'd really only see them at team meetings, which rarely happened in the summer, and 7-on-7s, which was twice a week, Tuesday and Thursday. Could be completely different, just going from my perspective. And so like that first 7-on-7, you're like, it feels like bullets are flying. You're like, this is way too fast. This is not high school 7-on-7. Like, what am I doing here? Like kind of that doubt creeps in. And then slowly 7-on-7 gets a little bit easier. By the end of the summer, you're not like a veteran by any means, but you actually, the upperclassmen know your name. You obviously know their names and so on and so forth. But that camp is so different because for that first 3 weeks, it's nothing but football, right? So it's an install period followed by, slowly hitting, followed by pads. And if you did not graduate early, our year was Dallas Lee, Zach Mettenberger, quite the name, Aaron Murray, and one other person I forgot, were Chase Vassar maybe, were the 4 early grads, and everyone else was the same boat as I was. And I think for players now, again, it may be different, but there's a lot of nerves, right? Confidence mixed with fear. Like, can I compete at this level, right? And for me, I could only differentiate myself early on through blocking and physicality. So it was like I was very insecure for that first week where we were still running around in our underwear and helmets. You know what I mean? Because it's like I wasn't the fastest guy. I didn't look like Orson did. You know what I mean? And so I didn't start getting my footing really until day 1, 2, and 3 of pads. And then, I think that's where I was able to get a little bit of confidence and kind of, feel more. But it's tough, man.
Is that physicality really kind of what wakes you up? Because I know just in my experience playing, it was always that, right? You get those nerves, and then you take a hit or you give a hit first, and it's like, all right, let's go.
Yeah, I think it's. I've obviously not a boxer, and I've never been a boxer, but I would liken it to something of that nature, right? Like you're always kind of tiptoeing around these things. You're running a 10-yard dig, and then all of a sudden, Rashad Jones smacks you in the face, and you're like, and you get up, and you're like, okay, this is like an all SEC caliber safety dude, played 10 years in the league, and then you're like, okay, I'm alive, right? My body's intact. I can get up and go play the next. But no doubt, it's like it's an adjustment, and I think like you just got to kind of get out there, and no matter how prepared you are, you're never going to be as prepared as you think, and it's never going to go as badly as you think either, right?
Mhm.
That's always the beauty of like the tape, right? The tape never
Yeah.
lies. Some of the best film sessions I've ever had, I had the worst anxiety going in because I thought I played like shit.
Mhm.
Some of the worst tape sessions I've ever had. I felt good about myself when I sat in that in my position room chair because I was like, oh, I played good as hell, and then I graded out at like a 68. So
Yeah.
I just think ultimately it's one of those things that if you go full speed, you can afford to make mistakes because they'll correct you. But if you don't go full speed, that's A, the higher likelihood you're going to get hurt, and B, the less likelihood of that you're going to play because the coaches won't be able to trust you to kind of go full
Yeah.
speed.
Yeah, and Kirby Smart's gonna be on that mic getting after these guys. So, you have to worry
100%.
about lacking at all because if you are, you're gonna get told. And, I mean, there's several places people, players, I should say, dealing with different situations, right? You have guys who just joined this summer. You have guys that maybe missed spring with an injury, and this is their first time getting back in the practice swing of things. You got guys coming off maybe 1 year and a freshman and are going into it with a newfound confidence and have a different situation there. And then of course, your senior guys and upperclassmen dealing with that in a different way. I'm really excited to see what we hear about these transfers in camp and these freshmen as well. A lot of talent, obviously, in that number one recruiting class. And like I said, several guys who are joining the team, have joined the team this summer. So, it's going to be really our first time hearing about them and how they're performing. And then ultimately, we'll get to see them here on August 31st, man. We're about to be here in August tomorrow. It's here already. Just 4 weeks until Georgia tees it off against Clemson in Atlanta Mercedes-Benz Stadium. It's going to be a great game. We'll get into that game, of course, really in a couple of weeks. We'll start getting into that. But I do want to touch on these driving arrests, and there's also another arrest recently from Ra Thomas, a more serious note, especially there. But, I feel like, national media, of course, is taking to this not lightly. And I don't think it should be. It's just my opinion. And then also, opposing SEC fan bases, especially. I mean, it's really all they're talking about as far as Georgia goes. And we don't have any football to really focus on either right now. So it's kind of like this is dominating. And it's every time it goes quiet, it feels like there's another incident already. I think it's up to Kirby Smart and these players. And I think it's more of a team focus, because you think about coach-led teams and player-led teams. And, you've been on some really, really good teams already, and you were on some teams that weren't great.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm curious on, how the coach-led to player-led fits for you. But I just think this is up to the players. It's up to the upperclassmen and the seniors to police themselves here, right? Because it all falls back on Kirby Smart because he is the head coach. But, I'm not trying to, apologetically for Kirby Smart say anything, but I just, you put yourself in that position and you can only set so many rules, do so many things. It could be harsher here, of course, right? But is that the best move? I just don't know if it's an easy science. But he has to let these guys, make their own decisions. That's ultimately what they are. He's not their dictator per se. But they have a free will. They have to make their own decisions. They're in college. They're kids. So there's a lot of pieces to this. What say you about, that maybe the coach led and the player led and what you think about maybe the ultimate fix for this, if you have any ideas?
Yeah, well, I think first and foremost, like the one underlying fact about human beings is that all human beings are flawed. Everyone makes mistakes. I think it's clear that I've made mistakes in my life, right? I know my teammates, and my friends in their lives and people that I love have made mistakes. Some of those mistakes end up being in the public, right? Some no one ever knows about, right? And when I see, players' names or just athletes' names in the media, right, I often think about that Nick Saban clip, and I know Nick Saban is. I think now we can all respect and speak highly of him now that he is retired and he's no longer one of our foes. But when he was talking about Musa Muhammad, right, when he was at Michigan State, there's a great clip of Nick Saban talking about, like, when players get in trouble, he's like, what do you want me to do? Do you want me to throw them off the team? Right? Like, what is that going to do? Right? Throw them out on the street to where they have no accountability, have nobody to discipline them, have nobody to kind of mentor them, put their arm around them. And so I'm always of the opinion that people deserve second chances, and sometimes they even deserve third, fourth chances, right? You never know what people are going through personally. You certainly don't know what some of these kids have grown up in, right? The types of environments that they probably had to endure over time, and the types of things that they had to overcome in order to get where they are, and the cultural difference in which they've had to kind of adhere to, that are probably much different that I had to grow up in or you had to grow up in. And I'm not making excuses. I'm not. I'm just saying that you never know what the situation is that someone is dealing with. So with that being said, man, anytime anybody from Georgia or any young athlete gets in trouble, I always just try to sit, pause, and not react emotionally, not be quick to judge. And that wasn't always the case. When I was in college, I used to get frustrated as heck when some of my teammates would get in trouble, because I was just like, man, we're all college kids. We all do dumb stuff, but you could do less dumb stuff and don't end up in the newspaper, right?
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, to answer your question, to kind of get back on track, it's like some of the best teams I ever played on were quote unquote player led, right? But that culture, that the players in which were leading, right? And I like to think I was one of the players that was, leading during that time. Ultimately, the culture was set by the coaches, right? And then the players bought in, earned the trust of the coaches to take over the leadership, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I think so when coaches say, oh, like, we want the players to lead, we want them to set the tempo and set the culture, it's like, at the end of the day, that's just a different way of the coach saying, we want to put our trust in the players to do the right thing and lead the team and grow the team and mature the team throughout the season. And so I think there's plenty of leaders on this team. My guess is Carson Beck has had a number of different meetings, probably hasn't hit the press because we're not in season. And I would imagine they're rallying behind each other, right? Look, the speeding thing is weird. I don't know what's going on with that. Like, yeah. I don't know. Like, I had a 2003 Chevy Tahoe. I would always joke that it was like a Panzer tank rolling through Germany in 1944. The thing couldn't go faster than 50 miles per hour anyway. But, these kids have a lot of money. They have a lot of freedom. And
in the summer, right? I mean,
in the summer.
Yeah.
Dumb stuff happens. And so, but staying on that point, coaches have that playbook, right? When we interviewed the player from the past spring, and he talked about the DNA of the team. What do you want the DNA of the team to be?
Yeah, Ja'Cory Thomas. Yeah.
Ja'Cory Thomas. Love that kid, man. I'm rooting for him because that was such a great interview. And I learned something about Kirby and about his program. Kirby, he understands what he wants the DNA to be. It's up to the players to absorb that DNA and let it almost infect them and infect the team. And so the team can build off that. And then that's when the players ultimately take over the leadership role. But right now, day one of every season and every fall camp, it's not a player-led team, man. The coaches are setting the tempo, and then the players ultimately take over as that trust is earned and built.
Yeah. And the reason I really mention that too is just speaking to Warren Brinson a lot about the school sessions and, what they've instituted. I think it was several years ago, the national championship season, ironically enough, that they started that. Basically, players get up and tell their story, and they try to get more relationships built that way, so you can know the why beside the guy you're in battle with, and these guys and already knows it's a battle out there, especially when you're in October in an SEC game with fans lubed up and on the outside, yeah,
doing dumb things that no one writes about.
Yeah. So I think it's an important part of that, and I would like to imagine that these things come up in that, you know what happened and own up to what you did. I think that's the right move, but ultimately, and then we'll end it here. Is just it's up to Kirby Smart and the Georgia program, all included, to fix this. At least do less dumb stuff, like you said, and then it'll go away eventually. As far as the national coverage and the criticism from SEC faithful and nationally as well. But
look, Kirby will probably it'll probably get to the point where he says no one's allowed to have a car on campus, right?
Yeah.
No, that's it. Like Coach Rick would bet. We had one summer where guys kept getting in trouble, and this was before Uber, right? So a couple guys got a DUI or public intoxication, what have you, college stuff, right? Not good stuff. No, not making excuses. The coach was like, no downtown, and he had Gant and Gant's boys he was like, if you guys are downtown past 9, if you want to go on a date with your girlfriend at 8, you better be home by 8:59, because if we see you downtown, morning runs. If we see you downtown twice, suspensions for the games, right? Quarters, what have you. So
they have player shuttles. I'm sorry.
No.
They have player shuttles. You can call at any time.
I'm sure they got stuff, but it's Kirby will get a hold of it, right? And if you got to restrict freedoms and start treating them like children,
pick one guy in college football you would want to fix this problem, or be the coach of your team that is having these issues to come in and attempt to fix it. It's Kirby Smart.
Oh, no doubt.
It was Nick Saban. It's Kirby Smart now.
100%.
And hey, Nick Saban's he's got nothing to do. Call him up.
I don't know. He might never step foot in Alabama again if he takes any sort of role over in the Dogs, even if it's just an analyst role for a day.
Yeah, dude, I can't wait for the Nick Saban nuggets that come out while he's on College Game Day. I'm sure he'll be on the CFP, the ESPN with Kirk and them on when the CFP rankings come out and stuff, and the Nuggets. And then everybody's going to run with it, man. Can you imagine like him picking Georgia over Alabama or something like that?
He's such a good storyteller. He can set the scene so well. So I'm excited for him on TV as well.
It's going to be fun. But, kind of moving on off the Ra Thomas arrest there. It's a second arrest. Dude, he's suspended indefinitely per reports. So what does that mean for UGA wide receivers? It doesn't seem like he's going to play. I wouldn't think so. Right? So what does that mean? I think it's more stress on transfers, the youngsters like Anthony Evans, Jacoby White, Nitro Tuggle. But, Colby Young, he's similar body type to Ra. He's that typical X. I mean, is he going to have a lot more responsibility? I mean, he played well in the spring game, right? And already, like learning an offensive system like that and getting reps. I mean, that's when it comes to the comfortability and then the trust from the coaches and ultimately a quarterback and Carson Beck to be at the right spot at the right time. Right. So I think he's going to have some more responsibility on his shoulders. And then really, I mean, the returning guys like your Dominic Lovett and your Dylan Bell, they're going to have some more on them as well. I mean, I think they have the talent, Georgia does, and thank God for the transfer portal there, because, they only took 2 wideouts in last year's class. They're really hammering that position hard, high school recruiting wise in this cycle, which I think is a no-brainer move, especially, James Coley's done a really good job on the recruiting trail, I think, and asserting almost his dominance there, especially in Florida and his connections there. But it is going to be a little different. I think, Artie, what I thought about when thinking about this issue, as far as, we don't know if it's an issue yet, but it seems like it with Ra and his issues, is, the depth that tied in there with Delp and Urasek. I think it's really, really beneficial for Georgia to get Urasek in from Stanford. I think he is that kind of inline type that he can run into rounds like Bowers and be good after the catch. He did that at Stanford. So I think it's kind of an all-committee approach is what I'm saying, to really provide that balance you need as both of a running team and through the air, right? Because that's where Georgia's going to be really good, is getting these guys in space. And I think Mike Bobo does that so well, and nobody knows that better than Artie here, playing under him for so long. So I think it'll be fine, but I think it'll be through a committee. And it's kind of like what we talked about with replacing Brock Bowers, which we'll get to here in a minute. What do you think about, the extra stress on these receivers, the depth issue there, and how they can really overcome it?
Yeah, well, I think we got two awesome transfers. Colby Young, you mentioned, London Humphreys, assuming he's healthy and ready to go. I think he had a healthy spring. He's the guy from Vanderbilt, obviously you remember, but I think we have plenty, unless I was mistaken, right?
No, you're right. You're on it. Yeah.
And I think those two guys, I think both those guys are going to be additions for us. Good additions. The good thing about the talent in which that we have recruited is they all have natural talent. It's just a matter of who can separate themselves, get acclimated quickly if they're a young guy, and then ultimately translate that talent into production on the field. But Coach Bobo, I know you mentioned, kind of him and how he likes to tight ends. His natural state in a perfect world is to play with two tight ends and utilize two tights. And it's funny that the new guys come from Stanford, because it was my 2010 or 11 going to 12. It was going to 11 because Orson was still here. And Coach Lilly actually went out to Stanford and started, examining their game tape and their schemes with Harbaugh, because that's when they had like Colby Fleener. They had another H-back guy, Hewitt.
Yes, dude. When you mentioned Hewitt, I just got flashbacks. He was a dog.
He was that number 89. He was like a H-back, fullback, tight end. So like there was like 3 or 4 guys that ended up playing in the league. Levine Tolilo was another guy who played for the Falcons for a while, and the guy Zach Ertz. So that's like 3 pros that play 10 years in the league right there. Anyway, Bobo was fascinated with that, and that's when they had me, Bruce Figgins, who got to move to fullback, Aaron White, and Orson Charles. J. Rome was a freshman, and so we had a bunch of guys in the tight end room, and we were just trying to figure out how to use 2 tight ends. How can we get more tight end bodies in the field? How do we do that? We moved Bruce Figgins to fullback, so he started every game at fullback, right? We had myself and Aaron White and really rotating, then Orson getting probably 70% of the snaps. He was an All-American that year. And so I say that to say this: the guys they have now are more talented than everyone I just mentioned, minus probably Orson. And when you think about what Bobo wants to do, is he wants to create mismatches, right? And he was able to do it with Brock Bowers. He was able to do it with Delp. Delp got a little banged up here or there, so he didn't get as many snaps as he would have liked. But from my understanding and just knowing what I know about Coach Bobo, is he is going to put the best personnel out there that he thinks will give them the best chance to win. And if it's playing a lot of 2 tight sets or even 3 tight sets, and going from like a single back formation with 3 wide receivers and a tight end, but there's 3 tight end bodies in there, right? And they can move around, go from 2 tights to I formation to spread it out, 4 wides. Like, he will do that, and he will find ways for Carson to get these different guys the ball. And whether it's hitting it vertical, whether it's attacking the seam or attacking the boundaries, right? And I think for me, knowing what Coach Bobo wants to do, he's very comfortable playing 2 tight, especially if he thinks he has guys who could be difference makers early on.
Yeah, and I don't have the numbers in front of me, but it's just Georgia was better with the tight ends group when you had multiple tight ends on the field, especially when you look at Darnell Washington and Brock in that year was dude that was so impressive.
Yeah, dude, he had Megatron.
Yeah, and Todd Monken utilized that so well, and I know Bobo did last year with Delp and Brock, but obviously injuries, and that of course, knock on wood, this year, right? You have Delp and you have Yursek there, and also Lawson Lucky, who I'm really excited about. Who he was just battling injuries last year. We were talking about him a lot before that season, right? And I know you were on his train. I was getting on there as well. And Pierce Spurlin's out now, so knock on wood, keep healthy, because they're so much better when you use those tight ends.
Totally agree.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk a little bit of Heisman for Carson Beck. This is really gaining some steam now. Vegas, they left Carson at the top, and it's like between him and Quinn, Dylan Gabriel's gotten some recent push there as well. It's feel like the odds are changing each week as far as who's the favorite to take home the trophy. What needs to happen for him to win it? And here, I'll give you my thoughts. So obviously the trophy is decided over a season, but you watch enough college football and seasons throughout history, it's like the big matchups, right? And then the end of the year. Can you just go off, right? So obviously health matters here. But I think the performances against Bama, Texas, and Ole Miss, I mean, that schedule in its own right has gotten so much national talk, and for good reason.
Yep.
I mean, those are 3 CFP contenders. Clemson's a very talented team, guys. We'll get into that. Did some coverage of them last year for the Players Lounge in that season. I know they didn't have a great year and a typical down year for Dabo Swinney, pretty uncharacteristic, but that defense is really good. All right, they've got a great group up front, Barrett Carter at linebacker and such. So they could even be one of those teams at the end of the season. You look back and you're like, man, Georgia did this against Clemson. If they win, of course, they're favored pretty heavily. And then obviously the end of the season there. But I think those performances are what's going to run on the highlight reels when everybody's talking about Heisman when it comes that time, right? How did you perform? I mean, Ole Miss last year, incredible, right? That was just an absolute whooping that Georgia put on the Rebels. And then Texas is going to be really, really interesting. And these are on the road too, so you even add that factor in, right? And I think he played well against Bama, not up to the snuff, obviously, that he was in that team. And Georgia shot themselves in the foot so much around him as well. But I think he has the offensive line to do it, especially, right? Might be the best group in the country, very, very deep. Even if some injuries do happen, and we know it's going to be most likely a longer season for every team, especially at the top there and in the expanded CFP format. But he has the O-line to do it. I think the running back room is really intriguing. Obviously, you know how that helps. If we had Aaron Murray, he would go off about this, but how the running backs help, right, with everything in that running game. And I think Georgia has a real opportunity to kind of get back to those ways this season, because I love what Trevor Etienne brings to the table. He's still my number one standout from the spring game, the way he was moving, the comfortability he kind of showed in that offense too, just not even, obviously running, but also catching the ball out of the backfield and the kind of the levels that provides. He gets upfield so quickly. And we already talked about the tight end room, receivers, a little bit of questions there in the depth that we just talked about, but at the top with Dominic Lovett and such, the connection those two have, and then Dylan Bell and everything he can do as far as versatility goes, I think it sets up really well for Carson. And that's obviously why Vegas likes him a lot already. But what do you think he has to do, man? Any thoughts on that to really take it home?
Yeah, I think like ultimately for a guy in his position, kind of like what Stetson was a couple of years ago, it's like if you just kind of run the table and you're the best player on the best team,
yeah,
the very least is you're going to be in New York, right, for the ceremony. So that I guess that would be my answer. It's just like run the table. Way easier said than done, particularly in this schedule. You probably, and I'm just looking at it. I was just pulled it up when you were saying it, and I was like, you might be able to trip up once, but it's, from a Heisman perspective, I mean, you could probably trip up twice and still be a top 12 team in the SEC. But just for the Heisman discussion, ultimately, I think if he runs the table and he plays well, and it's just kind of like that's the kind of the award, right? Unless like in the super unique years like the 05 Robert Griffin or like the 05 race between Reggie Bush and Vince Young, or things of that, or like I think it was McCaffrey year was with Baker maybe or somebody, I forgot. But anyway, it's such an odd award because it's just like the stats are so not inflated, but they're just so ridiculous these days, right?
Yeah.
But ultimately, I think if Georgia's going to get their first Heisman Trophy winner since the great Herschel Walker, it's going to be from the quarterback position, and it's going to be a guy that runs the table when they are at the bare minimum, top 3 team in the country, right, going into the playoff. Because I imagine that the award will be given before the playoffs start. So
yeah, it's like the standard is so, and you made a good point there. The standard is so much different comparatively to, let's say, you're maybe like Robert Griffin. We just mentioned it at Baylor, or a team like that, right? And it's like the preseason hype is included to it. Like, did you live up to expectations? I think he has to exceed expectations really
totally
to get his name, because he's like, all right, number 1 overall pick. We're considering him for that next year. Got a lot of projections there, and obviously the Heisman talk is really kicked off too. ahead of the season. But how cool would it be for Carson and Quinn Ewers to just tear it up in the first, month and a half of the season,
Oh
right?
yeah,
They
totally.
meet in Austin. I mean, that's what we're gonna get. And then even looking ahead to that, right? Let's say for Georgia podcast's sake, that Georgia wins, Carson Beck goes off, right? Quinn, maybe because he got beat by Jordan Carson Beck, his name kind of goes down the list a little bit. And then Jackson Dart has been playing awesome this whole time. And then late in the season, boom, in November, I think it's November 7th.
It's after the four. It's the second. It's 2 weeks after Texas. So it's Texas, Florida, Ole Miss. Love that you brought up Jackson Dart, because I had as soon as you said Heisman, I wrote his name down, because
he can run the ball too. Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah, he's just a
and
funky.
Lane Kiffin.
They're just funky, and Lane's going to be like, if Jackson comes out first 2 weeks and throws for like 500 and then 400 yards, Lane's not going to be quiet. He's every form of social media and interview he has, he's going to say Heisman, because Lane knows what he's doing. He's very smart, very savvy, knows how to market himself and his guys. So totally with you. I would love.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I would love for an undefeated matchup between Ole Miss and Georgia, and the two Heisman front runners going head to head. And I believe it's in Oxford, correct, this year?
Yes, it is, man. The Grove is going to be pumping. That's going to be awesome. But
what were you going to say?
Yeah, so that just kind of made me think about it. And because a recent Kirby Smart interview, he talked about the Heisman and basically embracing it. It's like, typical Heisman, we're not going to be hunted. I say typical Kirby Smart, we're not going to be hunted kind of mentality. As far as, we something we embrace the Heisman talk for Carson. So you can tell that he really wants it for Carson, because why not? Totally. Because he's not like a guy who just transferred in. He's a guy who waited his turn. We've talked about that until we're blue in the face about he's waited his turn and got picked over from Stetson Bennett, picked over rather. And now he's waited his turn. And that would be full circle stuff right there. And then if he wins the Heisman like that and he stays healthy, he's getting picked number 1 overall too. So that would just be incredible.
I think he's probably, unless something drastic happens,
most likely,
he's probably going number 1 overall no matter what. And I think that's the right mindset for Kirby, because, ultimately it's like, if you creep around these things and you're just like trying to not remain humble, that's the wrong term, but just like, you got to embrace these things, right? Like, Georgia's not the underdog, but the reputation that they have earned. And to keep that culture alive, to keep it consistent, you got to set goals, set lofty expectations, and go out and pursue them. And I think that's what Kirby's doing, and that's why they continue to have success.
Absolutely. And before we move on, guys, thank you for jumping in with us. J.C. Shelton, Arthur Lynch, former Georgia tight end. If you have any questions or comments, throw them in there. I'm trying to monitor those, so happy to talk about what you want us to here as we do our first live show. Really, we'll call it the season. It's early.
Season's on.
Yeah. But let's talk a little bit. I have this one thing I'm going to run by you, Artie. So, considering the length of the season for the top teams that most likely are going to get in, right? The added games, right? The length of the season, and then the prowess of the offensive lines around the country, right? You look at those teams. Georgia, obviously. We're talking about Texas. Ole Miss got some beef up there, right? Ohio State, Oregon, those teams that are really at the top, they happen to have some of the best offensive lines in the country. I expect a lot of ground and pound, man. Almost like old days, maybe different formations. I don't know if we're going to go back to the traditional teams don't keep fullbacks like that anymore. But I'm talking about run the stinking ball a lot, right? Because you want to shorten those games, right? I mean, less injuries, the shorter the game. Don't put your receiver over the middle of the field as much if you can, right? You see what I'm getting at here? Does that make any sense? I just think we're going to see a lot of ground and pound more than your typical throw it around, right? Just to shorten the games a little bit and move on, because you have such a longer season for those top teams that want to stay healthy.
My philosophy is this, and this is rooted in what Coach Bobo used to ingrain in us on a daily basis, like run the damn ball. Be physical, step on their throats, take their will, right? Like impose your will to take their souls is what we used to say. And if I'll never forget Auburn 2011, same game where Carter Rambo had the pick six and the place went nuts. In the second half, like we went up big early on, but in the second half, like we really couldn't get things going in the air. And so Bobo was like, we're going two tights, we're going 22 personnel, two tights and a fullback. We're running power and lead for the rest of the game. And that's all we did.
I love
We
that.
went power and lead for the rest of the game. And we beat them. I think it was like 38-0 or something of that. And
If you don't love that, something's wrong with you.
yeah. He was like, we're running power and lead. Polo 46 and 47, which is just like a combo point. Power. Po is power. Low is for lead. So Polo is combo. Murray gets up there. He reads the defense. If you see him go easy, opposite, or easy, check with me, that means we were running power. Now we're running lead. And my God, dude, we just imposed our will and stepped on their throats for a whole second half. And obviously, different scenario in that game. We were up big. But I just think ultimately Bobo always wants to establish the run and establish the run early. And I think historically speaking, UGA is a team that's always been built that way. We've got talented running backs. I'm sure there's a couple guys there that want to take the next step and be the guy. So I'm with you, right? Yeah. Yes, we got a stallion at quarterback. We got the golden arm, the golden boy. But at the end of the day, it's like if you have an opportunity to run the ball and run it down someone's throat and establish your dominance early on and create an identity for a football team early in the season, I think you got to do that.
Absolutely. And I didn't even mention, Roderick Robinson and Branson, the physicality they impose.
Beast, that's beast.
And Branson, I don't know if how many reps he's going to get as he works back. From what I've heard, doing very well in his recovery from that knee. So we'll see. I think it's more of a thing where they start to use him more and more throughout the season, right? Get some game reps under his belt. But when he's at full tilt, I mean, we saw him as a freshman, just the burst that he has, but also the size. That's an incredible combination, and that's a run the stinking ball mentality. You throw him and Roger back there, and Trevor's your more outside and can catch the ball. But move on here. So biggest preseason misconception for Georgia, Artie. I'm going to give you replacing Bowers, and the defensive line. Now, we've talked about this before at length, but as a quick refresher, and I think me and Artie agree, it's going to be more of a committee. I know I mentioned that earlier about rah-rah, but more of a committee approach on spreading out those reps. Generational player like that comes obviously once in a generation, guys. There's not going to be somebody out there like Benjamin Urisek's not going to do that. Oscar Delp's not going to do that. But you can spread the ball around and still get that production, right? Still keep the number 5 offense in 2023 moving.